Sir is a gold medalist in MA from Andhra University and PhD in Economics of Education from Delhi School of Economics. National Award of the UGC in Education for the Outstanding Scholarly Research in 1999. Tilak sir to address the students and the parents.
After listening to eminent experts, Professor Prasad Garu, Professor Sitaram Rao Garu, Professor Nirvadri, Professor Ramachandran and many others, in fact there is really nothing much now I have to say. I find it very difficult to say something new which is not already stated. But I will try to say something which is sensible, but maybe slightly repetition some of the issues, but also will try to go a little bit beyond that. I'm really sorry that your lunch is getting delayed, but I'll shorten it also as much as possible. I just say that. Original PowerPoint presentation I think I dropped the idea given the context. What I will briefly describe in the next perhaps half an hour or 40 minutes, if not more, is essentially referred to the higher education scene in the country, in India as a whole, and what is happening. What are the trends in higher education during the last 3, 4, 5, 6 decades? And what are some of the challenges and policy responses to the challenges that we face now? And many of the things that we are facing, that many of the challenges we are facing, many of the solutions that we are finding, and some of which are being implemented, are also being done in many other countries. So we learn from many other countries, but other countries are also learning from Indian experience in this particular globalized world. Let me start briefly highlighting how higher education is important. I think 2-3 decades it has to really take a lot of time, a lot of efforts to convince the people that education is a very important one. People should go to schools and colleges, government should be concerned with respect to education, etc. But today, increasingly, we find everybody understands how important higher education is. We realize that without higher education, individuals cannot progress, societies cannot progress. In fact, societies will perish if people do not have good higher education systems. Higher education is regarded as the most powerful instrument for economic development, economic growth, reduction in poverty, improving income distribution in the country, reducing inequalities between different groups of population, scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, non-scheduled population, backward classes, inequalities between men and women, inequalities between the poor and the rich. In fact, all kinds of inequalities can be very well addressed by a good higher education system in any society. In fact, higher education is considered the most important equalizer, even in an unequal society. Even if the other resources are unequally distributed, higher education has the potential to make and produce a good equal society, an egalitarian society. In economics, some of you are very, very familiar with this concept that we have public goods and private goods. Private goods are those, both goods are important, and private goods are those goods that are concerned with the individuals themselves. And so we as a collective body, the government, the state doesn't have to bother about these private goods. Does not have to. But it can, if it can, it may do. But public goods are those goods where the benefits are not confined to the individuals. Benefits are not exclusive to the students and their parents who send their children to schools, but others also benefit. In fact, others who are not going to the colleges will also benefit from those who are going to the colleges. These benefits are known as externalities, or in layman's language they are also called social benefits, but that's not the exact best term. And these externalities are very large and very varied with respect to higher education, in the sense that these externalities could be in terms of economic benefits. These benefits could be in terms of social benefits, creating better understanding of the people, social cohesion, national integration, etc. These benefits could be in terms of better health environment. These benefits could be in terms of better governance, better political systems, better democratic systems, etc., etc. In fact, there's a very, very long list of externalities that one can think of that's coming from higher education. So if higher education is under-provided, if there is under-investment in higher education, not only those who are able to go to schools and colleges nowadays will not go later, but the rest of the society also suffers a lot. The social welfare, or this loss in social welfare, would be tremendous if the governments do not spend adequately on higher education, if people do not go and have good higher education. So one should recognize that it's a very, very special public good compared to many other goods and services that the governments provide or governments are interested in. So governments have to bear really very special interest in providing higher education because it affects the people, a large section of the society would be affected, and also for a long term, because the benefits that we get from higher education flow for a very, very long period. Even from individual point of view, the benefits that you get from higher education will flow for the next 40 years, 50 years, until you're not only working life, even beyond your working life. And when I'm gone, the benefits will also flow over generations. Your education will have an effect on your children's education, your children's environment, children's economic and social welfare. In that particular sense, higher education is one activity we have to see in the future. If we have bad policies with respect to higher education today, that will affect the nation's permanent for a very long period for generations to come. So in that sense, we have to really formulate very careful policies, having a long, broad vision of understanding of how and what kind of a society we would like to develop, and accordingly plan and develop the higher education systems. So it's very important from a variety of angles that the societies pay a lot of attention to the development of good higher education systems. Today we have a lot of literature, not only from economics, but also from many social scientists, how education contributes to economic growth and transform even the developing countries into developed societies, and backward sections of the population into better societies, into better population, politically unstable societies into stable governments and stable societies, and politically mature societies, apart from making technological advancements. So it became so important today that many countries have recognized, international community has recognized that it's not only primary education is considered as a basic need, it's an essential need, and that's the reason why we also put under different constitutional provisions and make it compulsory, etc. And it's recognized that it's not enough if we concentrate on primary education or elementary education. We should treat higher education like primary education that should be provided to everybody in the society and of good quality. So the statement something like higher education is no longer a luxury of the people. It is essential for the survival of the people and for the survival of the nations. In modern days world, higher education is the basic education of the kind that we thought of earlier. Now, during the post-independence period, during the last six decades, or nearly 7 decades, in one sense we made very terrific expansion with respect to higher education. I think Prof has referred to some of the plus points with respect to the education system and also some negatives. And one important plus point that we have made is very increasing the numbers to very, very impressive numbers. From a very, very limited base in 1947 or 1950 when we started development planning in the country, today we have something like 900 universities, 40,000 colleges, and we have something like 36 million students in colleges and universities. The number of students in our higher education system is larger than the population of many countries of the world. So in that sense, it is a very large system. It's not just one of the very large systems, it's the second largest system in the world after China. It used to be the third largest system after China and the United States, but today we are better than the United States in terms of the numbers and the size of the higher education system. The size of the higher education system has a lot of implications, and I will briefly refer to them. But we also have reduced the inequalities in higher education to a very great extent over the last 6-7 decades. Particularly, inequalities between boys and girls in participation in higher education has been reduced to almost the minimum levels. We have nearly half the student population who are women in higher education, and in some states it's more than half. 47-48% is the national average we have, compared to less than 10% of 10 to 12% at the time of independence that we have. And that's a very significant achievement for a developing country. Many countries, many developing countries are still struggling to achieve gender parity in higher education. Similarly, partly because of the reservation policies and partly because of many other conditions and developments that have taken place, the inequalities between the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes on the one side and the non-scheduled population in terms of their participation in higher education has also improved to a very, very great extent. Even though still we find inequalities between the scheduled and non-scheduled population. But the rate of improvement has been quite impressive. And the improvement with respect to scheduled tribes is much larger, much higher than the improvement with respect to scheduled castes, of course. Third, we also could establish some of the very high quality institutions in the country. And I particularly refer to this point because, again, this became an eyesore for many other developing countries. Developing countries who are economically still underdeveloped and still struggling could never dream of having institutions like IITs, IIMs. It's only India, not now, even in the 1960s, we have established some of these best institutions. So in terms of some of the quality initiatives, we have shown, we have proved to ourselves and also we have proved to the world that a developing country can establish and run high quality institutions. Quality of higher education is not a luxury or to outreach only. It can be made available in the developing countries and to a larger sections of the population. The large-scale expansion of higher education, improvement in wider access, reduction in inequalities has contributed to a variety of aspects of development of the society. Today we have numbers of graduates coming from our education system in surplus. So earlier we used to fear problems of unemployment, or problems of brain drain both. Today we don't speak about brain drain. We speak something proudly that we are exporting manpower to the other countries. And I think Chief Minister also has stated very clearly that we would like to export manpower to other countries. And we say something proudly that United States, a country like the United States, the Silicon Valley in the United States is critically dependent upon Indian manpower. If the Indian engineering graduates come out of the United States for some reason, maybe because of the president's policies or so or otherwise, the Silicon Valley will collapse. So in that particular sense, our contribution to the international human capital is extremely high. We have also, in fact, the higher education system has also created or helped in developing a good working democracy, even though there are still pitfalls with respect to the democratic system that we have. In the sense that, again, many developing countries, both in the neighboring parts and also in distant parts, are still struggling with democracy. And whenever there is a transfer of power, there is a bloodshed. In fact, every transfer of power is associated with bloodshed and coups in many other countries, many other developing countries. Partly because they don't have good higher education systems, they don't have good, strong higher education systems. Our higher education system could produce really good thinkers, that I think Professor was referring to. We could produce people who can spearhead people's struggles for its social transformation, for political transformation, and for, of course, economic development. So we could produce critical thinkers, politicians, scientists, statesmen, whatnot, in fact, all kinds of people were produced. And that's also a very important achievement that we have today. Whilst there are quite a few other achievements that we can speak about it proudly, there are also quite a few important problems that we face. And I refer to again 2 or 3 important problems before we come to the other policy responses. I said there are something like 35 million students in our higher education system, and that's a very large number. But as a proportion of the students' population, as a proportion of the youth population who is expected to go to the higher education system is defined as something like 18 to 23 age group, both nationally and also internationally. So out of this youth population of 18 to 23, hardly 25% goes to the schools and colleges. And this 25% gross enrollment ratio is said to be not adequate for economic transformation of the countries, certainly a country like India. And if we have a tall and lofty goals of economic transformation, and we have the goals of transforming the Indian economy into a developed society, get rid of the label of the developing country as fast as possible, we would like to develop a knowledge society, and we would like to create a humane society in the future. And if you want to do that, 25% enrollment ratio is not adequate. There is a lot of research which shows that we need something like 40% enrollment ratio. If we want to reach a threshold level for a society to go into the next stage of development of economic transformation and social transformation. So we should be really, we need more expansion, of course, more expansion in the sense of more quality expansion, not expansion of any kind. Second, I said that we have improved with respect to inequalities between boys and girls, inequalities between scheduled and non-scheduled population. But inequalities between rural and urban regions in the country are still very high, in general and also with respect to higher education. We find many places where we don't have really colleges or access to colleges, where the enrollment ratio is less than 5% also, compared to a national average of 24%, where the enrollment ratio in some of the most backward districts is less than 5%. I think it's only 12-5-year plan was identified, and something like 374 backward blocks were identified for setting up of new colleges, and they were set up. But still there are problems. We have very high level of inequalities between rural and urban regions, and high level of interstate inequalities. Good quality institutions, good number of higher education institutions per population are available in some of the states, particularly in some of the southern states. And if you go to the northern belt, excluding Delhi, you find very backward poor in terms of numbers and in terms of quality higher education institutions. So the access to higher education is unequally distributed between rural and urban and between different states in the country. Much more importantly, I find that inequalities between the rich and the poor, between the richest and the poorest sections of the society, in their participation in higher education and also, of course, in economic angles, are not only very high, but they're also increasing over the years. Inequalities are increasing. While with respect to inequalities of every other dimension, that is rural, urban, scheduled, non-scheduled, men and women, is coming down, inequalities between the richest sections of the society and the poorest sections of the societies are increasing over the years. And that must be a very serious concern of every society. And we recognize that. That's the reason why we find new programs under the name of inclusive society, etc., in the 11th plan onwards, and I'll come back to that one. The third important serious problem, which is being increasingly recognized, is the quality of higher education. We have a few very good high quality institutions, whether it's IITs, IIMs, or central universities, or some colleges, or some centers of excellence in universities and colleges, state and central. But across the system as a whole, we find that standards of higher education are very low, and they're also falling over the years. And there are several explanations, or several explanations that have been given. One is, of course, the low employability of the graduates. It's been often very repeatedly stated that hardly 25% to 30% of our students, of our graduates, are employable. Remaining 60-70% are not, or did not find any good jobs, and decent jobs, of course. And even those who get the jobs are not necessarily having a good required jobs or matching their qualifications, etc. Many of them are going for jobs for which they are overqualified. So unemployment problem is becoming a very serious problem nowadays, and that has to be really addressed. And that is mostly attributed to the poor quality and poor irrelevance of higher education curriculum that we have in the country. We also, in fact, we find that, I think it was also a point made by others, the quality of graduates that are being produced today in terms of the values, in terms of the character that is being imbibed in the youth population is under question. Whether it is nationalism, whether it is social values, whether it is concern for others, with respect to quite a few important values that we cherish. And we find that increasingly more and more graduates are coming with poor, low character and national and social values. Apart from these two, we also increasingly recognize the President has stated, the Presidents of India have stated repeatedly, not one, the Prime Ministers have stated that we have so many universities, but not even one of the universities is the top universities in the world. In fact, we have global university ranking systems, and every year we come with a large list of the best universities in the country. And not a single university from the 900 institutions that we have figures in the top 100, not even top 200. We have something like Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and a few IITs figuring in the rankings, but much below 300, 400, between 400 to 500, 500 to 600. So we don't have a single institution which can be called a world-class university, whatever way you can understand a world-class university. There is no clear understanding, but I think we can understand a good class, good quality university that is comparable to the best. And we have to really, in the global scene, we fare very, very badly with respect to the higher education system. Again, there are several other problems, but I think these are very important problems that we have to really look at if we want to develop a good, strong, vibrant higher education system for the development of the society. In the present context, there are also quite a few enabling factors, but there are also quite a few constraints that we have if we want to develop a strong higher education system. One, the system is increasing, the country as a whole is increasingly getting globalized. It's not in the 1960s and 70s when the country, we can say that we can close the doors and we can shut our eyes and say that we are a society separate from the rest of the world. Today, not only not only countries like India, but even communist countries which were closed completely for a very long period can remain in isolation. They are being increasingly influenced by the global forces. What is happening in Indian higher education system will have a significant effect on the development of the society in the western part or the eastern parts of the world. And what is happening in those countries will also have a very significant impact on the higher education system and also the economic systems of these countries like India. So the countries are getting increasingly globalized. That's both an opportunity to develop higher education systems which are relevant for the globalized society, but that's also a big challenge that we have to address. Second important contextual factor that we have to recognize is the role of the state is being increasingly redefined. Conventionally, we understood that the state has an important responsibility of doing quite a few important functions, and one of the important functions is education, including higher education. And as a result, it was also education, including higher education, was a state monopoly for centuries. And even in India, after post-independence until, say, mid-80s, higher education was nearly a state monopoly. There were few private actors. Private actors were those who are philanthropic and who are of a different kind compared to the private actors of today. So state monopoly was, even though monopoly in economics is not really a respectable one, but state monopoly with respect to higher education, with respect to school education was considered an important one. It's a positive aspect. Today we find that I think higher education, the state's role has to be redefined with respect to higher education. Whether the state can continue to have a monopoly or whether we can allow the private sector, whether we can allow the markets to come into education systems and can have education markets. Or in our language, can have education bazaars. We already have education bazaars. So the role of the state, the functions of the state are being redefined in many areas, including higher education, and that has a serious implication for the development of higher education policies. Third, I think it is being increasingly stated and widely stated that we have a big youth force, and the size of the population, the size of the youth population would be the largest one in India. Will have a big demographic dividend. Again, that's an important opportunity, but that's also an important constraint. If you don't take care of this huge youth force with good skills and good knowledge and good higher education systems, the same population will create a different kind of social, economic, political problems. Again, that can be a disaster for us. So a demographic dividend, unless taken care of with good higher education policies, can turn out to be a demographic disaster for the entire country. Fourth, we also have a good revolution in information technology, which is considered a very positive factor today, particularly for the spread of higher education systems. And already we have good history of having non-conventional higher education system in terms of ODL, in terms of today online courses, use of MOOCs, use of SPIAM, and many other ICT-related activities. And that's one factor that one has to see how far we can tap to address some of the present issues that we have with respect to the higher education system, how far they are desirable to produce good higher education systems and good human citizens. Now, but at the same time, we find wide explosion in terms of numbers, in terms of numbers of institutions is taking place, or what can be described as higher education is getting massified. Massification of higher education is a phenomenon of the 21st century of higher education in India. While numbers are increasing demand is there for higher education system, government's funding for higher education has come down, has been stagnant in many years, and has been coming down also with respect to quite a few important aspects. Everywhere the government has been extremely reluctant to spend on higher education, partly because of valid reasons that the governments do not have resources, but that's only partly because even when the government has resources, the government is not necessarily interested in spending on higher education. Assuming that the government need not necessarily fund higher education, the society, the rest of the society, the markets, the private sector, the individuals, students and families, they can take care of the funding requirements of higher education, and the government need not necessarily fund them. We also question, along with the role of the state, we also question whether higher education is a public good or can it be treated as a private good. And if it is classified as a private good, or if it is classified as a non-merit good under the classification the government has adopted in the recent years, then the government need not necessarily bother about it. Government need not necessarily plan, government need not necessarily have the policy framework for higher education, government need not necessarily finance, of course, if it is considered as a private good. As I said, private goods are those goods that the government need not bother about at all in any respect. So while for decades and centuries we did not question the concept of public good in higher education, today we started increasingly questioning whether it is a public good or whether it's a private good, or at least whether it's a mixed good, that we can minimize the role of the states to a minimum extent and allow the markets and the individuals to take care of it. These questions are coming up repeatedly from learned sources, from government sources, from almost everywhere. Now, the most important problem, of course, for every government, every society faces with respect to higher education is a traditional problem. Traditional problem in the sense of a problem that we know very well for a very long period. Education systems, the school education or higher education systems have to address what are known as 3 E's. The 3 E's are expansion of education, equity in education, and also excellence in education. These are also defined by the education as 3 Q's: quantitative expansion, quality of education, and quantity, quality, and equity in education. While often many states, many countries, including India, try to focus on one of these 3 aspects, and ignore the others. Again, partly because they're constrained by resources, but also partly constrained by the understanding of the nature of education and nature of higher education. We focus on the expansion of the system, say in the 11th five-year plan, we said that we will increase the number of universities and colleges. And the 12th plan, we will be concerned with the quality of higher education. And then we recruit the teachers, or we provide infrastructure, etc. That cannot take place. That should not take place, in the sense that we concentrate on one of these 3 aspects and ignore the remaining 2. We need to have a really good balance between these 3's. A good balance, it doesn't mean equal importance, but we have to have the expansion is meaningful, expansion of quality institutions, and expansion of institutions which are also inclusive in the society that promotes wider access. If there is an institution which says that it is an excellent institution, but its doors are closed to the people, poor people, because they are not able to pay for it, I think there is a problem with the very understanding of excellence or quality in higher education. Excellence by definition must necessarily be inclusive. Otherwise, we are distorting the concept, we are distorting the very term excellence in education. So it's very easily said that we have to balance between these three Qs, but that's really a very tough task. As I said, many countries historically, if you look at it, decades and decades, one decade they concentrate on one, and the next decade they try to concentrate on the next one, but by that time it's too late. Today we find that the system is expanded so much that if you want to improve the quality of higher education, then it's becoming very complicated in terms of number of institutions, in terms of actors, in terms of public-private institutions, etc., etc. Another important serious constraint that we have is not only public funding. Public funding, as I said, is coming down in absolute terms and also in per student terms much more clearly. And I think one of the important problems that we created and became a major constraint is teachers. Quality of teachers and the quantity of teachers. And today we find something like 30, 40, 50% of positions being vacant in many institutions, including IITs, IIMs, central universities to undergraduate colleges. I think we are running the higher education system essentially or predominantly with the help of guest teachers, contract teachers. Otherwise the system will collapse. And that's being encouraged now. That's being almost legalized to have contract teachers and guest teachers. I think there are also recently UGs who made some more provisions of how to make the guest teachers, etc. So we are legalizing the process of having contractual teachers, guest teachers, on the assumption that we don't need really good quality teachers for higher education system, and that will have a very serious effect. As you understand, we had really myopic policies with respect to teacher recruitment. After 1990s, we stopped teacher recruitment for nearly 16 years in almost every institution in the country, every state in the country, and every institution in the country. It's only after 16, 17 years there was some relaxation, and today we try to recruit, and the government says that we don't find sufficient number of people. Obviously, many people were disillusioned because there is no recruitment. People didn't go for masters and PhD programs, and today you don't have sufficient number of PhD graduates to be appointed as teachers in the colleges and the others. As a result, we played with the policies of having relaxing the qualifications. Like in many engineering colleges, I was told already that B.Tech graduates teach even M.Tech graduates. And we played with the policy of having NET, introduce the NET, withdraw the NET as an essential qualification, and the next day again you reintroduce, etc., etc. And still we have a serious problem. I do not know how to address it, but there are some initiatives that are being taken nowadays. In fact, in the 11th and 12th 5-year plans, some ideas came up on how to develop higher education system, not only have more and more universities, increase the number of central universities, it doubled the IIMs, it doubled the number of IITs, and even state universities were increased, but of course a larger expansion took place with respect to private universities. But the government also wanted to improve the quality of higher education under the excellence initiatives, or initiatives under the name of excellence in higher education, and promised to recruit qualified faculty, or at least intended to recruit qualified faculty, which is still a major task. And also introduced quite a few curricular reforms, like choice-based credit courses, diverse choice of subjects, facilities for innovations and research in institutions of higher education, creating networks and hubs. It is also felt that our institutions are not sufficiently networked with other institutions in the world, and particularly in a globalized world, that's very important to have more and more international students, international faculties, and also have strong networks, both for research and also for teaching purposes with other institutions. So we would like to create education hubs. In fact, once the minister said that we would like to make higher education system in India as a major higher education hub, for the entire world, or at least for the developing world. So there are quite a few important promises that were made in the 11th and 12th plans, and a few initiatives were taken either for the governance or for the financing of education. And one or two very specific ones that I briefly refer to very quickly is one for the governance. They introduced the RUSA system. And on the assumption that we succeeded very well with the mission mode approach in school education. We have exactly a similar mission for primary education called SSA, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan. We have a similar mission for secondary education called Rashtriya Madhyamik Shiksha Abhiyan. So the government felt that a similar mission mode approach of Rashtriya Uchatar Shiksha Abhiyan, RUSA, would do good for the development of higher education systems. It has some good intentions, but it also has quite a few major constraints and major problems. With the very objective of having this mission mode in higher education, similar to the school education, is to have one major umbrella program of the central government for funding higher education development. All the schemes of the central government are expected to come under one particular basket. That's how it was coined with respect to the SSA and RMSA, and that was how it was expected to come in the RUSA. I do not know how it will be coming. But one important point with respect to RUSA, or the mission mode approach to education, is quite interesting. In the sense, nowhere in our legislation so far, we find any reference to the responsibilities of the center and the state governments in funding education systems. So central government is giving money, in 1 year perhaps reasonably very well, and the next year it is cutting, and perhaps we will not know it. And so same is the case with the state governments. Governments were spending and governments were reducing, cutting and increasing the budgets for education without any proper understanding. I don't say there is a great proper understanding now, but what is RUSA promised, what is SSA promised, what is RMSA promised with respect to secondary education was at least a definition of, not even definition, even clearly stipulating that the central government has to finance so much and the state government will finance so much in different proportions and changing proportions. Of course, with respect to SSA, it was 85% to come from the central government, 15% from the state governments, which was to gradually come down to 50-50. Similar approach was adopted with respect to secondary education, and exactly that is stated with respect to higher education. 60% of the additional needs, what we used to define in our budget terminology as plan grants or plan expenditures. The additional needs will have to come from the state central government. The 40% has to be funded by the state government. So these numbers are important in the sense that we don't find such numbers earlier at all. And as a result, as I said, in one state, one particular year, you find 90% of the expenditure being met by the central government and 10% by the state, and another state vice versa. But today, at least, that's becoming clearer, that the states are also assured that in the next year, if you promise to spend 40%, the 60% needs will come. So it also enables better planning of the higher education systems. In fact, RUSA has quite a few important features in this sense, from the political science point of view. Education is a state subject in India, and RUSA recognizes that states have an important responsibility of not only just receiving the money from the central government and do it, but also adopt the whole state higher education system as its own, prepare a plan for higher education system as a whole, and develop a perspective for the development of higher education, and accordingly go for this. And in this particular task, take the help of the state councils of higher education. So setting up of state councils of higher education has become an important prerequisite for RUSA funding. And of course, there are several other preconditions which were not met. Like recruit all the faculties, there should not be any vacant positions. But I think still we have 30-40% vacant positions. And we should have an accreditation system. And it was also stated, RUSA in the beginning, I think it's still there, that every state should have an accrediting system comparable to NAC, or with the help of the NAC they have developed it. Kerala has developed it. Many other states are yet to develop their own accreditation agencies. In fact, there are questions whether to have so many every state to have its own accreditation agency with respect to higher education. Because it is also felt that with respect to higher education, the central government has a responsibility to have a national understanding, national framework of higher education, rather than completely leaving it to the state governments. And another important feature with respect to the RUSA is, which is found to be an important problem by the people, is earlier UGC funds used to come directly to the universities and colleges, development grants, but today everything has to come through the state government. So a different kind of a political layer is there, and how far that is good, whether it is national politics is good or state politics is good with respect to allocation of resources to the states, with respect to the allocation of resources to the universities and colleges. There are also quite a few other academic reforms that are being envisaged under the RUSA approach, and many have still to be developed. Many states have to do it, and many initiatives the central government has also to make very clear formulation. But it can also be seen as the center which is planning to reduce its role and responsibilities with respect to developing a good policy framework for higher education as a whole, for the country as a whole, giving it, diversifying it, giving it, decentralizing the responsibilities in states. So the national character would be at stake, and states which are doing good can do much better and can get benefited from by the RUSA scheme, and perhaps develop good higher education systems, and states which are lagging behind may suffer more. And same is the case with respect to universities and colleges. But there are a couple of other important measures that were taken up, that the assessment by the NAC is mandatory from NAC or by the other agencies, etc. And that is coming as an important one. Many countries in the world were surprised that all the institutions were not necessarily required to go for accreditation for a very long period. It's only made mandatory nowadays. Assuming that an idea of competition between the universities among themselves, or colleges between different colleges, competition will improve efficiency, competition will improve quality of education in the country. The government tries to induce the institutions to be competitive. Also, finding that we don't have any world-class universities like in the global ranking systems, and we should develop our own universities. There are quite a few measures, particularly the NIRF, National Institute Ranking Framework, was developed. And the idea is essentially to promote at least healthy competition between colleges for public funds, both for state funds and also for central government funds from the UGC. For research, for teaching, of course, and for extracurricular activities. For everything, there will be competition. So in some sense, from a system of block funding, block grants, that was a system that we have for a very long period, at least we would like to introduce competitive funding. Competitive funding for research, competitive funding for many activities. And as a result today, I think you are finding quite a few advertisements coming from the central government, MHRD and other agencies, bidding for research, tenders for research projects, which was not the phenomenon earlier. People were identified, research institutions participated and applied for funds, and they used to get it. But now competition is the motto. Competition is the point that is coming up in a very big way. How far that is good for the society to develop a good higher education system is a question that one has to really look at it. Because the whole system of block grants, which is not unique to India, is there in almost all parts of the world, is based upon an important point that if you want to develop solid, strong higher education systems, you need a huge amount of block grants, which will give a very fair degree of autonomy to the institutions. And if you don't provide those block grants, if you provide either norm-based or outcome-linked funding or competition-based funding, that to that extent you are reducing the autonomy of the institutions to develop. And autonomy is a highly cherished concept, but particularly with respect to higher education. If you don't, in fact, most of the universities which became great, whether in the world global university rankings or otherwise, are those universities which are fairly autonomous. Autonomous with respect to academic aspects. In fact, I would say three kinds of autonomy. With respect to academic aspects, higher education institutions should be nearly fully autonomous, because they are the people dealing with the academic aspects. Whether it's curriculum, whether it's evaluation, whether it's teaching load, teaching practices, etc., they should be able to decide what to do and how to do it. With respect to administrative aspects, the autonomy need not necessarily be so high, but still we need a very high degree of autonomy because universities have to decide how many teachers have to be recruited, when they have to be recruited, what are the qualifications of the teachers, what should be the admission policies, etc., etc. So they also need a very fair degree of autonomy with respect to academic aspects. But of course, we don't have that. And with respect to financial aspects, the autonomy can be much at a much lesser level, essentially because you have state-funded institutions. And if we assume that state funds liberally, and that's an expectation that's a practice everywhere, then we should expect a lesser, or we should be ready to accept a lesser degree of financial autonomy. But I say 100% of full autonomy with respect to academic aspects, a very fairly high degree of autonomy with respect to academic aspects and administrative aspects, and a lesser amount of autonomy with respect to financial aspects is the best desirable model of creating autonomous institutions. But today I think we are talking about autonomous, graded autonomy to the institutions on different kinds of criteria. One important measure that I would like to refer to is that there are quite a few others. To set up world-class universities, we are also thinking, and in fact we started already having institutions of eminence, and some institutions are being identified which would be loaded with public funds and also with private funds, but even private institutions are being loaded with public funds. So create institutions of eminence with a long-term view, but I hope there's really a long-term view, but with a short-term expectation that they will be in the very near future and they become great institutions. To address comprehensively the most important problem, as I said, teachers are the most important problem and constraint that we have, is the government has launched a particular scheme, a national mission for teachers, Pandit scheme, which has quite a few important components for the development of quality of the teachers. Rather, for a very long period, we recognized that for primary school teachers, we need training as an essential qualification. So is the case with respect to secondary school teachers. For teachers in colleges and universities, pre-induction training was not necessary. But I think this is being conceived that we should see that there is a good amount of training, both pre-service and also in service for college teachers. The academic staff colleges were doing to some extent on a different level, but I think now it is being conceived as a major program for the improvement of the quality of the teachers, for the improvement of the commitment of the teachers and various attributes of the teachers, so that we will be able to produce a very good number of teachers of good quality for the development of a strong higher education system. Let me stop with one or two very simple points before you ask me here to stop. One, at the institutional level, it's important that we develop institutional plans. Whether it's a college or a university or a research institution, we don't really have a good habit of making institutional plans for the next 5 years, 10 years, etc. Of course, there are several constraints. We don't know how much money is assured, what will be the demand, what will be the supply, how many teachers will be recruited and will not be recruited. Despite several constraints, the importance of an institutional plan has to be recognized. And many institutions don't do it. We prepare, in fact, many institutions do not prepare even budgets. Or they do not prepare budgets meaningfully because they assume that yes, government gives 5% more, 5% less, etc., but there is something like a good budgeting system. So at the institutional level, we need to prepare good institutional plans which are inclusive of good financial plans, good sustainable financial plans. And I'm speaking with respect to public institutions, not to speak about private ones. And that's quite important. Second, we should also recognize that institutions within the country or institutions outside the country became really great in whatever way you measure, are those institutions which are really high-quality teaching programs and high-quality research institutions. In the NIRF or in the world-class universities, IISc figures essentially because it has the highest scores with respect to teaching and research. With respect to many other attributes, in fact, the scores of IISc is much less than the other scores, other institutions. Income generation, whether it is reputation, whether it is citations, etc. The scores of IISc are much less than the scores of other institutions. But with respect to teaching and research, these are the highest scores. So every institution must really focus on developing high quality teaching programs and high quality research programs. The emphasis must be on these two aspects. But there are quite a few other things. But at the national level also, we need a conducive environment to make a good policy plans for development of higher education. I'll start with 2 or 3 points. One, we have had a commitment of allocating something like 6% of national income to education. And it was also clearly found that something like 1.5% of the national income has to go for higher education from the public sector. And still we are spending less than or around 1% of GDP on higher education and 4% as a whole on education. So there is still a long way. And allocation of resources to a reasonable level assures the institutions of a sustainable method of developing higher education systems. And that assurance is not there. We find really very frequent ups and downs in the public funding for higher education at the institutional level, at the state level, or at the national level. And that does not go well for good development of good higher education systems. Second, we found that in the total budgets for higher education, again at the state level or the institutional level or at the national level, 2 important components which have a lot of implications for quality and equity in higher education are receiving very less attention. One is with respect to the amount of research, the amount of funds that are allocated for research. State government's budgets do not have any amount allocated for research at all. All the development grants, whatever little or high, they come from the UGC. So state government's higher education budgets do not have anything for research. Even at the institutional level, we find very little resources being spent on research activities. As a thumb rule, it was suggested in one of the committees that I was a member that at least something like 10% of the total higher education budget at every level, at the university level, at the college level, at the national level, must be spent on research activities. We want to develop good research environment in the society, in the country. Similarly, we also found that the amounts that are allocated for quality, for equity, for promoting equity in higher education, essentially in terms of scholarships, is very less. Something like 0.5%, 0.05%. 0.5%, 0.4% was allocated for scholarships at the national level. And that's not sufficient really if you want to promote equity in higher education system. In fact, you can use scholarships both for promoting equity and excellence, very common scholarships. And we had that idea, we had that practice for a very long period, but today I think we have different kinds of considerations. In fact, the whole idea of scholarships and fellowships in higher education is being replaced with student loans in a big way. Earlier we said that there are bigger sections of the society who cannot pay, who cannot meet the cost of higher education, so they should be given scholarships. But today the government says that why should we give scholarships? They can as well take loans, and loans are being increasingly made available. At least that's a statement that's being stated. So, but the importance of scholarships is much different, and the loans will not be able to tackle the problems. That's what we expect to tackle. So both for quality in terms of research and equity in terms of scholarships, the allocation of resources must be increased. And as I said, in one of the committees which I said that something like 10% of the resources must be allocated to each item. To research 10% and another 10% to scholarships. And that will promote both of these two. Another important aspect which we recommended earlier and that was partly addressed but not sufficiently well addressed was made at the time of 11th five-year plan. That at the school level we had something like an Operation Blackboard program 20 years ago. Like many people might be knowing about it. The idea was to see that every primary school in the country has at least a basic minimum level of facilities. In terms of infrastructure, in terms of classrooms, in terms of teachers, in terms of equipment, etc. And one reasonably acceptable interpretation is I think the program was a success. Almost all the schools that existed in 1986, or primary and upper primary schools that existed in 1986 were given these resources and they were in a better situation. We recommended that we need a similar program of Operation Blackboard in higher education to see that every college and every university has a basic minimum level of facilities to provide meaningful quality of education. Again, it includes infrastructure in terms of laboratories, libraries, classrooms, and also teachers. And quality teachers. That was got accepted, and UGC tried to do it in the 11th five-year plan by giving a one-time grant to even to those colleges which are not otherwise eligible. Non-FLB colleges, non-FLB colleges were also provided one-time grant, but that was not sufficient very well to do that. Even though the system is changing very rapidly, markets are coming in a big way, we should recognize that strong higher education systems in the world, historically and contemporarily, were built up with heavy state funding, not with relying upon private funding. System as a whole. You can develop a good private university, but you cannot develop a good private higher education system in the country as a whole. So it's important that if you want to develop a good, strong higher education system, you have to rely upon state finances. State has to come liberally with this. An American educationist who was very familiar with the Indian education system has very clearly stated, you have an objective of setting up a world-class universities, but remember that world has no private sector can set up a world-class university in India. India state has to take care of the responsibility of providing a good quality higher education systems. Lastly, I think it's important. Today we are speaking about national policy. We don't know what's exactly happening or what will happen in the near future with respect to the policy. But we really do not have a long-term policy with respect to higher education development. We had a policy in 1986 which doesn't have big things with respect to higher education, some were done, but we really do not have a clear, coherent, long-term policy for the development of higher education. And as a result, or otherwise, during the last 3 decades or 4 decades, including the most recent period, most recent times, today also, we are managing the education system with ad hoc orders, ad hoc executive orders. And they are issued today and perhaps they are withdrawn the next day and reintroduced the other day. Because they are ad hoc and quick solutions without clear understanding of having a long-term vision for the development. So we need a long-term clear vision for the development of the society and accordingly for the development of higher education. With a long-term perspective plan. Planning is still important even in those societies which are described as market societies. Planning is absolutely essential. So we need to have a long-term perspective plan for the development of higher education system. Again, we don't have that. The last point that I would like to state is, even though today I am speaking only with respect to higher education cannot be developed if we have a very bad school education system or a very weak school education system. So we have to say that we strengthen the school education system, we strengthen the quality and quantity of secondary education, quantity and quality of elementary education system, even if when we are concerned with the development of higher education system. Because a strong higher education system cannot be built when the school system is poor, and vice versa. You cannot have a really strong school system and a very weak higher education system. That's also a bad imbalanced system of development. So it's important to have a really fairly good understanding and a vision of what is an education system. I think that's what Professor was also saying. A good framework of the education system and how to develop in the long term. Certainly short-term quick fix solutions will not solve the problems. May seem to be solving the problems, but that will be extremely difficult. And with that, I'll stop here. But what we need is really, we need something like innovative thinking, innovative approaches to the development of higher education. Some of the approaches have to be reinvented because we did it, we practiced very well, but we forgot those practices. And there is a lot to learn from our own past and from the contemporary education scene. Let me thank the organizers, particularly Dr. Kamala and this government college for giving me this opportunity. Thank Professor Prasad for sharing this opportunity. And others for blessing. I thought that they will be leaving after this session, but they were very kind and I'm very happy that they are here. And thank all of you for the patient hearing, rather than going in between for your lunch. Thank you very much.
A very authentic presentation because of his wide research in this area. Very authentic presentation which identified critical challenges, also reflected on some alternative suggestions or solutions for the problems. I think this is what we are looking. We are looking not only critically understanding the concerns and the challenges of the system, but also as an academic, as a distinguished researcher, what are the solutions you are looking? To me, very good lecture, takeaways. If you ask me, what are the takeaways from this lecture? The autonomy is very critical for achieving the purposes of education. This is the focus. I think Mr. Tilak, when he said the world history of higher education also shows that the higher education institutions, only autonomous higher education institutions were able to play an important social role. I think this is also a very important message he is conveying, why you require some autonomy. 1948-49 Radhakrishnan Commission, in Radhakrishnan Commission, they clearly said, they made a distinction between public funding and autonomy of the institutions. The public funding doesn't mean, or government funding, state funding doesn't mean state control. State funding and state control are two different things. State funding is a social responsibility, autonomy also is a social responsibility. Because you see, there is a feeling sometimes in the government circle, because we are spending money, we are giving money, you have to be under our control. No, public funding is different. Public funding is because of the social purpose. Autonomy is necessary because unless you have the autonomy, there is no freedom to express your ideas, clash of ideas, through that only knowledge will grow. See, that is very important point I think he made. The third important point he made, I think is all his suggestions also, the need for that public policy or the ad hocism in educational policies and the need for public policy, when he emphasized at the institutional level there is a need for institution planning and there is a need for state level planning or there is a need for prioritizing state funding. All these things in the public policy, you know, public policy is nothing but what the government would like to do or what the society is expected of education. This is what public policy is. So Professor Tilak rightly emphasized the importance of public policy. I am sure all these ideas in the coming 1.5 days, in the evening sessions and next sessions, you will continue to debate on these things. If you have any other ideas also, because of the want of time, we are not opening for a discussion because of the want of time. I think we have to break for lunch. So probably organizers say that you can have a discussion with him also, is available in the informally, but we would like to, I personally would like to thank him, and it is a great opportunity to listen to him also. My suggestion is all his works also are available on the internet also. All of us will get benefit from reading his works also, understanding critically the context and the changes and the suggestions which are very useful also. So thank you, Prof. Tilak. Thank you very much.
Degree College, Serilingampally, and on behalf of the Department of Political Science, I am very thankful to Professor Jandhyala, who has focused on many issues that are related to access and equity in higher education. And even I am very thankful to our Prasad sir, who has presided the session. I know all are feeling angry, so I don't want to take much of your time. So thank you all. Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot.
ఇక్కడ ఇది చిన్న మ్యామ్ ఓకే ఓకే సార్